about what you can do for your child. Thank you again. And Precious is going to be right on your screen. It's in your screen. Welcome,
Hey,
Precious.
good
And
morning, coach. Good morning, everyone. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Precious. We're
Thank you
glad
so
we
much
are
for
here.
having me today.
Our daughters are here ready for you.
Thank you so much, coach.
Righty. So you have the floor.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, participants of the Understanding Your Child's Learning Style course 2023. This particular course is my favorite along my alley. It is something that I love and it has impacted my life and my practice so much. And I am so opportuned to be joining my amazing boss to be training you guys today. So, today we're going to be looking at identifying learning disabilities and strategies to help children who learn and think differently. Now, in the academy, we don't look at learning disabilities the way learning disabilities is looked at out there. We simply categorize these children as children who learn and think differently. Now, the diagnosis or assessment of learning disabilities is not a sentence, and your child has not been relegated to the background because they have a learning disability. Your child will lead a normal life, even with a learning disability. Just like Coach said, a number of us, if we are evaluated, you're going to see that you have one learning disability or the other. The only difference is that we don't live in a system where these things are diagnosed outrightly. A lot of our parents lived in ignorance, and trust me, consciously or unconsciously, you suffered for their ignorance. Now, let's take a quick look at data to see what learning disabilities are and how predominant it is in our society. I recently was working on a review from the academy on a mom whose child's life got better by doing what coach asked her to do during a consultation. And she said that immediately her son was suspected to have ADHD, this mother freaked out. She was so scared. When you think learning disabilities, what comes to your mind? A good percentage of the time is my child is going to be a dummy. Something is wrong with my child. Oh my God, is my child going to be Olodo Rabata? You know that kind of thing we typically say in the Nigerian academic system. No. Learning disabilities does not mean that your child is a dummy. I want you to take this home that your child has a learning disability because they learn and think and process concepts and informations differently than the typical child. So, your child is neurodivergent, they are not neurotypical. So, if they're learning maths, if a typical child is learning maths straightforward, your child might be have to learn maths, zigzag. That is just the difference. This might be the deliverance that you need before we get right into this module for today. Now, let's look at these quick statistics from the key learning disability in the United States of America. It says that 1 in every 59 children have one or several learning disabilities. This means that learning disabilities are actually very predominant in the educational system. It is there. If 1 in every 59 children has a learning disability. Number 2, 1 in every 5 children in the US have a learning and thinking difference, such as dyslexia or dyscalculia. We're going to get into those learning disabilities in a moment. Thirdly, 4 million people younger than 18 have learning disabilities. The next one, over 32 million Nigerians are struggling with reading, writing, spelling, comprehension difficulties, and other symptoms of learning disabilities. So what have we been able to establish so far? We've been able to establish that every child, every one child in a class of 60 pupils would have a learning disability. So what does this show you? It's actually very normal. Your child is not a dummy because they have a learning disability. If you get the knowledge you're going to be getting, oh, thank you. Now, if you get the knowledge you're going to be getting in this session, you're going to be armed. You are going to be armed. You are going to be armed. You will be armed. I'm saying this over and over again because the academy has armed me to, and we're going to get to this story in a bit, but the academy has armed me. It has armed me to work with tons of children, and their lives have changed just with the knowledge you'll be getting to today. So trust me, you are among the luckiest crop of parents in planet Earth today. I remember, throwback to 2020, I was a classroom teacher. I was in this classroom, I was a subject teacher, 4-year-olds. This teacher, my co-teacher at the time, someone says my volume is low. Can you hear me now? Because I've raised my voice. Apologies for that. Now, my co-teacher, the teacher of the class I was teaching at that time, took on this boy. His name was Daniel. Now, I honestly wish I know what I know now. In 2020, when this happened, this teacher would always beat Daniel. At the point I had to ask her, what is the problem? She said to me, if I don't beat this boy, he will not learn. My heart was shattered into pieces. I still shudder to think about what happened on that day. This lady in that school, beating is not allowed. But this teacher was so confused. She was so confused. She didn't know what to do. Guess what she did? She resorted to beating. This lady beat Daniel so much. Guys, guess what the problem was? He wasn't able to read. He lost attention easily. His focus levels were 0. Every time the teacher was teaching, Daniel was either fondling with something or doing something else. Do you see? Now, if I had known what I know now, best believe that teacher wouldn't have raised a finger on that boy. Just like Daniel, tons of children have been insulted, have been beaten, have been verbally abused just because they learn differently. Now, let's take a quick look at facts about learning disabilities. 1, a learning disability is not an intellectual disability. I want you to take note of these facts. Learning disabilities are not intellectual disabilities. So it means that your child is still as intelligent as the child who doesn't have a learning disability. The only difference is that this child learns and thinks differently. Children with learning disabilities have an average and even sometimes an above average intelligence. They are not dullards. They are not unteachable. They just learn differently. Number 2, learning differences varies from person to person. So you can't put every child who has a learning disability in a box. It doesn't work like that. There are learning differences that vary from one learner to the other. Number 3, early identification and early intervention is king. Take note of this. Early identification and early intervention is king. Last but not the least, an intentional parenting system can cushion the concerned areas and the effects of a learning disability. You did not hear this one. An intentional parenting system, an intentional parenting process, a commitment to intentionally parent a child can cushion the concerned areas of learning disabilities. Where learning disabilities become very eminent and becomes shown is when parents have done absolutely nothing. But if you find yourself in a system, even before that learning disability is identified, guess what? You are able to start nipping it in the bud one at a time. You would only realize at a point that, my child, but it's not as bad as it would have been. I'm going to tell you guys a story. Just hold that thought. Now, let's look at the possible causes. Someone said they missed number two. Number two says that learning disabilities varies from person to person. It varies from child to child. Now, what are the possible causes? Somebody missed number three. Early intervention and assessment is king. It's key. Early intervention and assessment is key. Now, let's move to the possible causes. What would cause learning disabilities? Is it something I did? Is it from my family lineage? Is it hereditary? Is it genetic? Now, there is no proven cause of learning disabilities, but there are related causes. There is no one thing that we can say this is what the parent did right or did wrong, or this. There is nothing we could use to trace at the moment, but there are relative causes that you could use to ascertain if a child has learning disabilities. One is genetics. Two is problem during birth and pregnancy. Anomalies in the developing brain of a fetus, illnesses at birth, alcohol or drugs, low birth weight, oxygen deprivation, birth asphyxia, prematurity or prolonged labor. These could be indicators that a child. So when a child presents with learning disabilities, a lot of times we love to ask questions. What happened at birth? It actually starts there. Then we could also look at after birth. Now, accidents that might have happened after birth. Probably the child bumped their head, had malnutrition, had severe illness. Now, let me give you two scenarios that have played out personally. My daughter came premature. I joined the academy in 2020. As at 2020, the doctors were beginning to say, okay, her delayed milestones are a lot, because after she had gained net control, after 6 months, she stopped experiencing she did stop achieving milestones. So she couldn't crawl, she couldn't walk, she couldn't do a lot of things. She was just going there looking at you. God, it was a heartbreaking time. That was the period I joined the Inner Circle 2021, and I started working with what was being taught in the Inner Circle. As at 2021, she was 2 years and 6 months. She had not started working yet. She had not started crawling. She was crawling with her stomach. So the doctor said, and she was not yet talking as well. She was 2 years and 6 months. Probably only mommy, water. She had not started talking a lot. She had not started talking at all. So the doctor said that they were suspecting global developmental delay because of the prematurity and low birth weight. But something crazy happened. I was in the Inner Circle, and I was doing the tasks. Coach said no screen time. I bounced. People are doing 30 minutes. We're doing zero. We're doing nothing. She wasn't talking. She wasn't moving. But the little she could do, I got the materials in the academy. Guys, guess what? 4 years later, exactly yesterday, my daughter's teacher came to me and said, Ma, Victory is doing so well. What happened? And I smiled. I said to myself, the Inner Circle happened. Now, this was what happened. Before the doctors could say that this is what is wrong with your child, she's having cognitive delays, intellectual disorder, all those blah blah dash, I had started building her cognitive skills through the activities in the academy. I had shunned screen time, zero, zilch, nothing. You're not looking at any damn screen. We wake up in the morning, we're doing one learning activity or the other. In the bathroom, we're doing one learning activity or the other. While we are on the road, we're doing one learning activity or the other. And shortly after a year, the difference is so clear. My daughter, who performance school, because I'll ask the teacher, Ma, what's happening? She's like, it is well. I'll ask the other teacher. My mom runs a school, so while we were there, we traveled for something. I'll ask my mom's teacher, what is happening? They're like, Ma, It is well. My daughter, she just turned 4 in March, is reading. If you know where we started from, she couldn't recognize num or colors. She didn't know shape. She didn't know nothing. To where we are, she's writing perfectly. Now, what is the difference? The inner circle happened. This is where I wanted to mention a system of intentional parenting is going to reduce to a large extent the concern areas you would see if your child has learning disabilities. An intentional parenting system will, to a large extent. Second scenario, 2016, I was teaching in a class. I was teaching 9-year-olds. I realized that this particular boy, he happens to be my cousin. He had severe jaundice at birth. We almost lost him. He was a vegetable. So the doctors had said that, told their parents that they should watch out, that this boy might be a vegetable. He might be a vegetable. So we first did it in class. His coordination, he was so clumsy. You're saying A, you're saying B. At the time, 2016, I was just a fresh graduate. I didn't know what was happening. But today, I am able to see a difference. I am able to see, okay, this must have been a learning disability that was triggered by the traumatic experience that the boy had before. Thank you guys so much. Now, it must have been a result of the traumatic experience that this, my cousin, had at birth. So you see, if your child had any traumatic experience, whether it was prematurity, prolonged labor, birth asphyxia, guys, open your eyes. Because I'm not saying that there's a possibility, but just open your eyes. When your eyes are open, you'll be able to tell early and nip it in the bud. Remember fact number 2, early intervention is key. You cannot leave learning disabilities till your child gets to 8. You now find out that your child has issues with reading. What were you doing from 1 to 7? Let us not forget that the ages 1 to 6 are the formative years. It's at those years. Now, learning disabilities do not have a cure. But there are interventions that an intentional parent can begin to do, even without paying experts and therapists. Now, there are severe cases of learning disabilities where occupational therapy, psychologists will be needed. But to an extent, there is something you can do. You are not utterly handicapped. You are not, your hands are not tied. If my child can learn, any child can learn. So when I shout that no child is a dummy, I'm not saying it because I just want to motivate you. Nah, that's not why I'm saying it. I'm saying it because I have lived it. All right, guys. So I believe that that is a great introduction to the concept of learning disabilities. Now let's move to a quick activity. We've been here for almost 30 minutes. Give me one word that you have heard. Let me ensure you've been with me all the while. Just tell me one thing that I have said that struck with you. Just one. It could be a word, it could be a sentence, it could be a paragraph, but just one thing. Let me ensure that we are all together. We're to do this in 30 seconds. One word you have heard in your own words. What do you now think that learning disabilities are? What do you think that learning disabilities are? Disability is not a problem, it's a difference. Yes, it's a learning and thinking difference. Someone says no screen time. All right, someone says no child is a dummy. Awesome, please keep it coming. Learning disability is not an intellectual disability. The truth is that for certain learning disabilities, there are strengths associated with those learning disabilities. For a child who is dyslexic has other strengths. We'll talk about that in another time. Now, let's look at the term learning disabilities. What does it mean? The term learning disabilities, what does it mean? It means an umbrella. Learning disabilities is an umbrella term that covers a range of neurological based disorders in learning that affects a person's ability to process, store, retrieve, or produce information. Now, learning disabilities are also a group of disorders that affect a broad range of academic and functional skills, including the ability to speak, listen, read, write, spell, reason, and organize information. It is a group of disorders. So the word learning disabilities is just an umbrella term that shows that a child has a broad range of academic and functional disorders. It affects a child's ability to speak, to listen, to read, to write, to spell, to reason, and organize information. So that means that if a child has learning disabilities, it could affect their ability to speak, verbal communication. It could affect their ability to listen. It could affect their ability to read, to write, to spell, to be involved in analytical task, to reason and organize information. Now, a child who has learning disability is not different. The only difference is that they would need a special educational provision made for them. A child who has learning disabilities is not different. They just need a little bit tweak to the way we teach them. There's a little bit tweak to the way we teach the neurotypical child and a tweak to the way we teach the neurodivergent child. If you teach the neurodivergent child, who is the child who has learning disabilities, the way you teach the child who has learning disabilities, there's going to be a problem. So they just need a little tweak. Now, how do you know your child has learning disabilities? Before we get to the whole symptoms and concern areas, a child who has learning disability has a greater difficulty in learning than the majority of children in the same age. They just have a greater difficulty in learning than the majority of children around that same age group. Yeah, that is how you can tell. Does your child have a greater difficulty? You teach numbers. Is this child always finding it difficult when others have grasped it? Let's say that there's a week plan and other children are able to learn the numbers in 3 days, but this particular child would have to take like 2 weeks. It's an indicator. We're not labeling the child, but it's like a signal. It's like a signal. How do I put it? It's like a trafficator showing pum, 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 pum. This child, check them out. So if you've had 3 children, child number 1 didn't have any problems with your numbers. They could learn it. You just say they learn it. Child number 2, the same thing. But child number 3, you have to do something extra to get them to learn. We're not labeling the children. We're just saying that you should take note of those differences. Now, let's move on to the different categories of learning disabilities. 1, we have learning disabilities in spoken language. This is simply learning disabilities that involves listening and speaking. Number 2, learning disabilities in written language. This involves reading, spelling, and writing. Learning disabilities in arithmetic. This involves calculation and concepts. Number 4, learning disabilities that involves reasoning, organization, integration of ideas and thoughts. Now, we just looked at the categories. Now, we now move to the types of learning disabilities. Now, these types of learning disabilities fall under these 4 main categories. The types of learning disabilities falls under these 4 main categories. 1, we have dysgraphia. Now, dysgraphia is spelled P-H-I-A. That is dysgraphia. Now, we're going to look at 4 major learning disabilities in this class, but would focus on 4. There are others, but for the course of this lesson and based on the questions you've been asking, we're just going to focus on 4. So we'll do due diligence to those learning disabilities. Dysgraphia is writing based. It affects a child's writing ability. Someone said I should go over the types, the categories again. One, spoken language, listening and speaking. Two, written language, reading, writing, and spelling. Three, arithmetic, which involves calculation of concepts. Four, reasoning, organization, and integration of ideas and thoughts. These are the categories. Now, we're not looking at the types. Type number one is dysgraphia. Now, dysgraphia affects writing. It affects a child's ability to write. It affects a child's ability to write creative writing, pen to paper kind of writing. It affects a child's ability to spell. It affects a child's ability to spell. These children present with very poor handwriting. They present with illegible handwriting. This kind of children have problem. They have trouble organizing letters, numbers, and words. Now, the major challenge that the children who have dysgraphia have revolves around the motor skills. Majorly, they are fine motor skills. Now, what are fine motor skills? Let's do a little bit crash course on what writing is for children between the ages of 1 to 10. Writing is a physical activity that comprises 4 major skills. A lot of times when we think about handwriting, what we're thinking is pen to paper, pencil to paper, writing utensil to a writing surface. So it could be pencils, crayons, but all you're thinking about is just give the child, they should start writing. No, writing is way beyond that. There are building blocks behind the scene that is helping children when they need to write. Now, for a child who has dysgraphia, it simply means that they have the inability to develop these skills. The number one skill is their gross motor skill. Gross motor skill simply involves the large muscles in the body. We're talking muscles that children need to run, to jump, to sit. Muscles in charge of postural control and core strength. Those are gross muscle. And gross motor is very important. You know that for a person to write, they would need to sit up. They would need to hold pencils. They would need to slouch. They would need a certain amount of shoulder stability. If not, they would tire out easily. Now, some children who have dyslexia do not have enough muscle strength. So they fatigue easily. Or they do not know how to use the shoulder muscles, the hand muscles, the finger strength to transmit it into writing. So guess what? You begin to see very illegible handwritings. The next skill we need are fine motor skills. Fine motor skills are simply the tiny muscles involved in writing. They're simply the tiny muscles of the body that we use to hold, to squeeze, to pinch, to squint. Now, if a child is going to write, I hope I have a writing utensil here. I have a pen here. If a child is going to write, we know that they would need to separate these fingers for them to be able to hold the writing utensil. But guess what parents do? We take pencil, we give it to the children, go and write. Go and write what? Without the skills that they need to write? Okay, we've talked about fine motor. We're going to look at the building blocks in a bit. The next will be the visual motor, visual perception. If a child needs to write, they should have developed, if a child should write, they should have developed their visual tracking abilities, because they would need to see, interpret what they've seen, then transmit or interpret it to paper. So you see visual perception. The next is cognitive abilities. They need to look and remember. They need to be able to recall. Okay, I wanted to write. Let's say I want to copy down what I have on my on the screen now. Module 3, identify, blah blah blah. Let's say the child wants to write module. They go M. They come back. A child who lacks cognitive ability will not remember where they stopped. That's why you see children missing letters. So these are the skills necessary for children to write. Now, even with these skills, we also have building blocks. Building blocks are simply things that are aiding the skills. So while you're developing these skills, you're also developing these building blocks. One, we have hand-finger strength. If a child is going to write and it is legible, they should be able to apply enough pressure on the writing utensil. Number two, they need hand dominance. When children are born, a lot of the times they are ambidextrous, they can use the both hands. But if they are going to write legibly, they would need to concentrate and develop the skills of one hand. So with time, through activities, they will now gain hand dominance. Then we have bilateral integration, the ability to use two hands. It means that when the child is writing, whether they are using their right or their left, it doesn't matter. If they are using their left, they would need to use their right to place their paper properly. This skill needs to be developed. We also have hand-eye coordination, which falls under the skill of visual motor. A child needs to be able to coordinate what they're seeing to their hands and interpret into paper. We also have hand division, these hands. Most times when children are beginning to write, when they're using the quadruped grip, they tend to use all of their fingers. But hand division means can they divide their thumb, their index finger, their middle finger, their pinky finger? Can they know the particular fingers they need to grip the pencils properly? Now, when children lack these building blocks and skills, inadvertently, it's going to affect their ability to write. So when a child has dysgraphia, they are struggling with fine motor skills. Remember we talked about fine motor skills. Pencil grasp, hand-finger strength, hand division. Have issues with gripping a pencil. They have issues with writing. They have issues with manipulating their writing utensils. So if a child has dysgraphia, they have issues with these fine motor skills. If a child is not grasping their pencil well, if they're grasping their pencil with a lot of energy, it would lead to finger fatigue or finger cramp. Their hands start paining them. They not start writing like where chicken is dancing on top of a paper. Do you understand? So difficulty with fine motor skill is one sign or concern area for dysgraphia. 2, poor, illegible, unreadable, and inconsistent writing. Poor, illegible, unreadable, and inconsistent writing. It's an indicator that a child might have dysgraphia. 3, inconsistent spacing, sizing, letter patterns, or staying on the line. When today the child is writing with tiny, the next day they are writing big, or in the same paragraph they need to write, they start with a capital letter, the letter will now be small, it will now be long, it will now be short. You know what an illegible handwriting means. That is a sign that your child has dysgraphia. The next is slow writing speed. When children are very slow or they are too fast, then lack of interest in writing. Because of it, writing is a chore. They are very tired, they easily get fatigued, they absolutely lack interest in writing. Next would be difficulty with spelling and grammar. Wrong pencil grips and not having knowledge of the letter patterns. Every letter has a pattern. First of all, we have patterns needed for writing. We have our strokes, we have our horizontal lines, our vertical lines, our curves, our zigzags, blah, blah, blah. Now, these patterns at the end make up writing. So, if a child is not able to use the right patterns, it could also be a sign of dysgraphia. Let me quickly mention that dysgraphia should not be suspected or diagnosed. Because I know of you are saying, my child, it took 5 out of 10. We're talking about a 2-year-old. This child must have dysgraphia. Please no. I'm going to explain myself in a bit. We only begin to suspect dysgraphia from the age of 6 to 7. Here's the reason. A child's level of motor movement and motor mastery, gross motor, visual motor, fine motor, is an important gauge to measure their writing progress. So we cannot say that a child lacks fine motor we cannot say that a child doesn't have, we cannot say that a child has dysgraphia if we have not committed to developing these core skills needed to write. We cannot say that a child has dysgraphia if you have not done the due diligence of developing a child's ability to write. Because the motor skills are an important gauge to check if a child is able to write. So if a child that is 6 or 7, we have not committed to building these motor skills, you can't even say. So before you diagnose, hold out. Ensure you have committed. You have done your due diligence of developing their motor skills before you rush and say, oh, my child has dysgraphia. But if your child is older than 7 and they still have all of this, they can't hold their pencils. Let's do a quick crash course on the stages of pencil grip. When children are between the ages of 1.5 to 2.5, they will typically hold their pencils like this. We call this the palmer's grip. It is typically normal. From age 2.5 to age 3.5, they will typically hold their pencils like this. We call it the digital pronet, die, 2. So they're just pinching 2 with the writing utensils, or they're holding it like this. Now, this next stage is the static tripod grip, which children hold their pencils the way we want them to hold it, like this. But the only difference is that instead of being flexible, they pinch the writing utensil or the pencil with all of their hands. And guess what happens? It begins to ache them because their hand is rigid. They will have to control the fingers from the shoulder, so they begin to get writing fatigue. But what we want children to have is the dynamic tripod grip, where they just hold their writing utensils with the thumb, the index finger, and the middle finger. This is what we want children to have achieved by age 6. Now, if your child is 6 and they're still holding their pencils as if they want to stab you, there's a problem. It's an indicator that that child has dysgraphia. It's a huge indicator. So, someone said writing is deeper. Yes, I actually say that there is more that meets the eyes than what you think the writing is. So, we've talked about all of these. What do we do? We call this segment of the webinar Help for My Child. How do I get involved? How do I help my child? If I have a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, or even a 4-year-old, number one, teach with feelings. Use the multi-sensory approach to helping your child write. Experts advise that if you focus on activities that involve a lot of tactile process, where children would have to feel, interact with materials, interact with objects, where they would have to feel. If you use loads of that, you're your way to helping your children write. Number 2, I'm going to explain what teach with feelings is. Hold on. Number 2, you need to concentrate on developing fine motor skills. So everyone, please, I'm going to quickly transition to my next device. So please, I'll be going off in a bit. I'll be coming back in the next 1 minute. Let me just transfer to another device. Thank you very much.
All right. Yes. I hope that we are following through. I hope that we are learning something. I hope that this is um, insightful for us. Precious will soon be back on. Had a little bit of network glitch, switching off to be here. All right. So yes, yes, I can see the comment section. I can see it buzzing. I told you, right? That you're going to be in for a good time today. There's a lot of information that is out there, and it's interesting how we just all sit back and just just think, oh, these things are not they are not like that. Oh, I don't need to learn and all of that. There's so much, so much to learn. I remember Precious's daughter, and I remember it was really bad when the review she shared about her daughter. And there are so many other parents right in the inner circle who have had children who have had from mild to acute learning disabilities. And let me also say something, buttressing something that the facilitator had said. You know, when it comes to learning disabilities, all right, you would see that it's not just about taking your child to a therapist, which is usually a good thing, right? Or taking intervention. There is what to do yourself as a parent. I don't know if Nonso is in this class. We had a parent whose child was autistic or is autistic, and of course, she had spent money going through all of the therapy sessions and all of that. But until she stepped in, there is a part, a role for you to play. And it's that role that we are re-emphasizing in the academy. In the academy, we do not believe in disabilities. We say that children who learn differently, all right, we have to use disability so that it can stick to you. But I'm sure that at the end of this session, you will begin to understand that it's just children who learn differently, who do not learn the way others learn. Because the truth of the matter is that some of these children are struggling. You're bombarding them with extra lesson teachers, and I keep saying it, what you need is for you to learn as a parent, not necessarily extra lesson teachers. But when we say it, some people tell us, oh, you don't want teachers to learn. Some people say to us, or to make money. Some people say to us, oh, that's not true, my children have been passing and all of that. Unfortunately, the child won't learn. Now, there is learning and there is passing exam. All right, it is not the same. So even in schools, a lot of schools are not do not even know these things, and it's unfortunate. All right, we can only do as much as we can do. We work with schools, do all of these sessions with schools, teach them, train them on what exactly to do, actually about learning and all of that. Because I had a mild struggle myself, I shared with you, I know, learning. Okay. And that was part of what helped me. All right, I had to go get a sand pit. I remember that my house was all full of sand pits. I had to redo how my son would learn. It's the same thing with a lot of learning disabilities. All right, I see kinesthetic learners myself as people who learn differently as well. All right, so your child can be a star even if your child is autistic. All right. Your child can be a star even if your child is autistic. All right. There are too many things that we do right in the academy that changes the tides of so many things that we're doing. So when we tell people, oh, you need to be in the academy, they say, some people even come to us and say, forget it. That woman just wants to make money with you people. It makes me laugh many of the times, me. That's fine. All right. And at the end of the day, it's actually to the benefit of the child. And then you see these same parents pay as much as 150,000 every month, lesson teachers, and then the result, he keeps struggling. All right. So learning disabilities are they are not something that you want to flip about or something that you're scared of. A parent reached out to me last week, a parent in the inner circle, and said, oh, her children, she's been abroad for a while. Her children were just, brought into the system. And she realized that her son was diagnosed with a disability. And she said to me they want to send the child to send, all right, special needs education and all of that. And by the time she reached out to me, I said to her, I said, do not let them, send him to send yet. Why not practice the tools? Because she hasn't been consistent. And then she decided to just do 1 week. She has her review all over. We've shared it all over social media. Just 1 week, and the difference was so clear. The problem is, are you willing to do the job? All right? Are you willing to do the job? It is very important. Somebody's asking, I hope this course will get insight about disabilities with regard to speaking for children. I don't understand that. And articulating words properly. If you do the things, if you've been listening, I'm sure you've gotten insight on what exactly to do. All right. It's empowering. Okay. If you are really ready to walk the talk, believe you me, you will not have a single problem. You will not need a therapist. You can actually do some of these interventions. All right. And you just learn the intervention, the processes, and you practice them. The problem is we're looking for magic. All right. You're looking for magic. The magic you're looking for, day. Day. All right. It's not something you need to go and find, real. You need to go and implement the things that you're learning. How many of us have implemented the 2 days of the modules that we have learned? How many people? A lot of us are still, still shouting, oh, wow, oh, this one, that one, and all of that. Because you're looking for a quick fix. Somebody is still asking insight on what to do with disabilities. Are you joking? There are a lot of insight that have already been shared, all right, that you can use to begin to help your child. Now, the earlier you help your child, the earlier your child can, work. We've shared 2 modules, a lot of intervention, a lot of tools, a lot of things there. But somebody is still waiting, so that we can just say, oh, once you do this, the child will just change today. No, the truth of the matter is you would need to step out of that your comfort zone. Step out of saying, I don't have time for all these puzzle things. I don't have time for all these don't watch TV. What would the children be doing? I'm sure a lot of us are already asking it. Someone was asking also, how do they help their children not to watch TV, not to regulate the TV time? The first thing you want to do, if you're listening to me, is to get a family value guide. On that family value guide, you build it, and then you get a family media plan, and then you build it. You regulate screen time. That's the first activity you should be doing. I do not think that anybody who has attended this course should not have gone back, all right? Should not have gone back and actually begin to work on these things that you are being told. I want to assume, I want to, say that by now you would have put a lot of things in perspective, okay? And put it, children do not need extra lesson teachers. I see it as a burden. There is no need, okay? There is no need for it. Trust me. This is just something that we do not want to talk about because number one, we're lazy to do our job as parents. Number two, we don't even know what to do. Number three, we think that the education success of our child is solely dependent on the kind of school they go to, and which is an unfortunate thing, all right, because a lot of the times it's actually more dependent on us and the environment we put our children before we can actually go to that places. Somebody said, I have a question. When you talked about trampolining, I didn't hear what you should do with the ball wall trampoline. I listened again, I couldn't grab it. I think you should go back to that module, man. It was very, well stated. I talked about holding the ball and jumping at the same pace with the ball when you're trampolining. All right. And I think I explained it even more than this. So when you hold the ball and you jump together, there's something, it turns the cognitive area of the brain. Okay. So that's it. Cutting out screen opened my child's neural path. That's it. I visited therapist tired, but it's nothing compared to the inner circle. Everything they said in therapy were just words. Inner circle is practical. Now that's the difference. He guides you. It's practically gives you how the guide. I believe in being the tangibility of what it says for you to actually be able to practice. Okay, so if you haven't even started, all right, if you haven't even started doing the tools, doing the things that you have learned in this place, and you're still listening to what it is that we're going to still share for you, that means you have not really been listening. There have been a lot shared, trampolining, cutting out screen. There have been a lot shared to help your child. Music classes, swimming. There's just a lot. And all of those things would help even a child who is struggling to learn. All right, you can ask your questions as we're waiting for Precious to re-log in. We apologize. Okay. Um, Thank you for resounding regulation of screen time. Even my 1 year old plus is dragging my phone with me, and my 6 year old feels sad when we hide TV remote. If you're still hiding TV remote, Augusta, there is something wrong with that system. Because what you need is not to hide TV remote. What you need is to teach your child why. See, when we begin to do these, first things, and we think that we are actually, making progress, you will see it backfire, because you would not be able to really make the kind of progress that you should be making. Your 1 year old has no business holding your phone. When my children were toddlers, for your information, there were phones when my own children were toddlers as well. I'm not as old, right? When my children were toddlers, when they hold the phone, we take it and tell them, no, it is not a toy. And then we give them a toy. Try that. Be consistent with it for so long. And don't be caught being inconsistent. One of the killers of parenting is actually inconsistency. So today you give the child the phone. You say, today I'm tired. Just take and play game. Tomorrow you say, no, don't touch my phone. Take this and learn it. Oh, take this and play. Your child won't get it. I have 13-year-olds today. My children dare not touch any electronics that is not how. My phone, why? It's not yours. It's not a toy. So you need to begin now to train your children. It's called training. It's not assuming. The more you assume, the more you actually would continue to struggle. The school I have my eyes on know these things. They teach kids according to learning style and also know about learning disabilities, but they teach with screens. What do you think, coach? I'm going to talk about teaching with screen in our schools. That's a big challenge that we have. When we do back to school masterclass, and one of the things I'd say, if you have a child in crèche and they use screens, or in nursery, run, because it's going to affect how that would really make your child think. All right. Mrs. Knox said, I know a parent that takes remote and PlayStation to work in his boots. Oh dear, we'll continue. Now you go tire. All right. My 9-year-old does not know how to watch TV. Beautiful. If they turn on the TV, she continues to play with her toys and crawl in the kitchen. She's always busy trying out new things. That's it. Your child between 0 to 18 months have no business with any kind of screen. TV, phone, tablet. We buy tablets and put TV in our children's room as a thing of pride, as a thing of pride. A child does not need a television in their room. A child does not need a television in their room. That's the truth. All right. Precious is here. Okay. Precious is here. My child finds it difficult to read and spell, and I'm sure that you will get to know that. Precious is back here.
Hey,
On the
coach.
yes,
Hey,
please.
everyone. Apologies for that.
Oh yes.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much, coach, for standing in. Hey, everyone. So we're continuing with what you could do. We call this help for your child. What you can do to help your child who is showing signs of dysgraphia. One, we've talked about teach with feelings. Take your mind off pen to paper when it has to do with handwriting. Take it to other multisensory ways we can get children to write. For instance, if you're teaching your child who has dysgraphia to form letters, there is something we call sand trays. Get a tray, put a sand in, get flashcards, improvise flashcards for yourself, place it in front of you, have them um, trace the letters on the sand tray. Your child already has phobia for writing if they have dysgraphia. So what you're supposed to do is to take writing off pen to paper for a start. Make it multisensory. Get Play-Doh, form letters with Play-Doh. It's something we call cutting and pasting. Create mock-ups of letters with a flashcard. Cut papers, colorful papers, shimmery papers. Have children form the patterns of letters with that. Now, just with this very simple way, we can get children who have dysgraphia to start writing, even without pen to paper. Just by working with tactile materials, the Play-Doh, the sand tray, the letter tracing, you're on your way to teaching your children to identify and work with letters. Another concern area for dysgraphia is that these children have challenges with identifying their letters and knowing the patterns that is needed for each letter. They have issues identifying their letters and knowing the patterns important for each letter. The next is build fine motor activities. Since these children already struggle with their fine motor activities, build it. One, Play-Doh. Just by manipulating Play-Doh, children in early years are able to build their hand finger strength. Work on lacing. The activities are called lacing. Take these down, Google it, you're going to see what they are. Now, as children pass their thread through the material they're supposed to be lacing with, they are building what we call hand-eye coordination. Presently in Lenville, we do not use pencil grip grasp materials. We do not necessarily teach children to grasp their pencils. Just by exposure to fine motor skills, they learn to pinch their pencils right. They learn the right pencil grasp method. So for our 2-year-olds, they are not using the Palmer's grip, they're not using the digital pronate, they are using their static tripod. Why? Because of enough exposure. That time you're supposed to use to your children, that time your child is supposed to use to watch their screens, they're supposed to use to interact with their iPad, give them their lesson kit, give them Play-Doh, give them building blocks, give them tweezers. Anything that will have a child doing this is a fantastic activity to teach pencil grasp. The next would be teach the rules of legible writing. Number one, patterns. Every letter is made up of specific patterns. There are things we'll call verbal cues. I bet you know what they are already. We might not know that they are called verbal cues. Verbal cues, A, uppercase A is a slant to the left, a slant to the right, and a dash. Now, those things, a slant, a dash, are patterns. B is a stroke, a curve on top, and a curve at the bottom. C is a curve. Dedicate ample time. If a child is struggling with legible writing, stop teaching them papers, pause, go back to pattern writing. My daughter struggled to write for a while, and funny enough, someone was asking me, why were you not pressured to? I'm like, I'm not pressured to impress anybody. We're doing 150 now. We couldn't do one as at September. What I did with those times was to beg her from a school, please teach this child patterns. We're not trying to compete with nobody. And just by teaching patterns, I've been able to help tons of children start writing. Their strokes, their curves, their left curve, their zigzag lines are more important in writing than writing. Because if they know the patterns, they will be able to write with a lot of ease. Number two, sizing. Children should practice the right sizing for letters. The next would be the appropriate spacing. Some writings are illegible, they are unreadable because the child does not know that they should put spaces between each writing. The next would be the writing speed. For legibility and children who have dysgraphia, our focus is not on speed, our focus is on legibility. If a child's handwriting is legible, if it is readable, if it's understandable, and if it is neat, subsequently they will catch up with speed. So if your child's teacher is complaining that your child is slow with writing, my advice is to advocate for that child. If a child has problems with legible writing, we shouldn't be trying to speed them up. This is more important. As they grab the whole thing, that fundamentals of writing, that's the word I was looking for. As they get the fundamentals of writing, speed will come. Speed will definitely come. But if you have children who are older than 8, who are still very slow writers, but they have gotten their legibility, they write pretty well for that age, you want to use timed writing. Set a time, and ask them to write within that time frame. The next would be to understand the core skills. Gross motor, a lot of play. We've already started talking about not giving your children screen. A lot of play. You don't, children who are couch potatoes, always on the screen, always sitting, they will not have enough. They would not have enough time to develop their gross motor skill. Now, what the inner circle does for you so beautifully is that in those early morning tools that you were given, you are inadvertently developing these skills without knowing it. So it's not labeled develop gross motor skill, but it's labeled play outside with your children. It's not labeled fine motor skill, but you're asked to color, you're asked to play. It's not labeled hand-eye coordination, but your children are asked to do puzzles. Do you see what is happening here? So if you're not yet in the inner circle, I don't advocate for the inner circle because I'm a team member. I advocate because the inner circle changed my daughter's life. There is an information scrolling on your screen. Please go and register. Your life, your child's life will thank you for it. Trust me, if you're to pay therapists, if you're to pay occupational therapists, if you're to pay psychologists, it is probably 10% of what you're paying in the inner circle. Why don't you start working on your child's skills even before it gets on your face? Awesome, thank you very much. Now we're moving to the next learning disability, which is dyscalculia. Now, in last year's session, a lot of parents are saying, is this why I did not like maths? It's like that, maybe that's the reason why I struggled with maths. I think I have dyslexia. Sorry, I think I have dyscalculia. Today, we are going to know if you have dyscalculia and if your child has dyscalculia, or if you're suspecting that your child might have dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is a specific learning disability that affects a person's ability to understand, work, and think analytically. It affects a child's ability to understand mathematical processes. It affects a child's ability to understand mathematical facts and also understand their numbers. Just like I mentioned in the beginning, that learning disabilities is an umbrella term. Dyscalculia is an umbrella term. It might present itself in different modes and ways. For some children, it will be difficulty understanding their numbers, learning facts about mathematics, identifying their numbers, identifying certain mathematical facts. It could be difficulty working with daily operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. It could be as simple as difficulty in counting. It can be as simple as difficulty with mental maths. It could be as simple as having to think thoroughly for a mathematical equation as simple as 1 plus 1. They will have to think. Instead of doing it mentally, they'll have to think 1, this, that. Now, dyscalculia is real. Tons of children who fail mathematics actually struggle with dyscalculia. I actually feel that dyscalculia is more predominant in our Nigerian system than dysgraphia. Now, let's look at concern areas in preschool. Now, unlike dysgraphia, you can begin to beam the light at the possibility of a child having dyscalculia from as early as 3 when they are taught to count. So, for preschool children, if a child has issues with learning to count, it's an indicator. It might not be, but it's an indicator. If a child struggles to connect numbers to objects, if you ask them, you place 10 bananas, you say, can you give me 3? If a child struggles to connect numbers with patterns, that is, or to connect numbers to objects. If a child has issues with organizing numbers in their sequence, one, maybe at age 7, a child still doesn't know after 1 is what, after 3 is what. If a child has issues counting backward at age 6, age 7, that's an indicator, because this is something they should be able to do in their sleep. If a child has issues recognizing number symbols in preschool when they have been taught, and they've been taught adequately and appropriately and effectively, and they still have issues differentiating plus, minus, equals to, that's an indicator. All right. Now, the next one would be for children in primary and secondary. If a child still has to use their fingers to count by age 8, age 9, age 10, if they can't do 2 plus 3, 5, or 3 plus 3 plus 4, 10, if they cannot do it mentally, then it's an indicator. The next would be having trouble with place value, not knowing to place numbers. If they were given an exercise to sequence numbers, this is what an 8-year-old should be able to do, like this. But if they have to struggle, if they have to think, it's an indicator. The next would be difficulty counting backwards. We've talked about that. Difficulty remembering basic maths facts, 2 times 3, 6. If a child has issues memorizing maths facts, particularly, that is an indicator. If a child is very slow to perform calculations, that is an indicator. If a child has weak mental math and arithmetic skills, mental math is a very, very important skill for children to have if they're going to thrive in solving maths. Your child can't always have to need manipulatives to do everything. If they have fractions, they should be able to do half of what they're solving mentally. They maybe use manipulatives or their calculators or their tables or their rough books to do the remaining. So if they have weak mental and arithmetic skill, it's an indicator. If a child has a high level of maths anxiety, that is an indicator. If a child has problem with critical thinking, analytical thinking, divergent thinking, if they only know one way to do a maths problem, it's an indicator. There are different ways to kill a rat when it has to do with maths. If a child is given fraction, there is no one way. There are different ways. If they just have to stick with one way, you don't see them thinking analytically and critically and flexibly, it's an indicator. The next one with there's calculia is that they always have social and emotional symptoms. These children have flat out phobia for mathematics. They have very serious phobia, anxiety, inferiority for maths. Also, if these children have very low attention span in maths, you see them fidgeting. These also group of children also have a fixed mindset. They feel that math is not for me because they have struggled and struggled and struggled. They've learned what we call learned helplessness. They feel like I can't do it again, so they make no effort. It's an indicator that that child might have dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is very predominant. If you get into a classroom, you're going to be able to tell one child who has a spectrum of dyscalculia, whether it's as simple as not knowing basic mathematical operations or as complex as not being able to do mental arithmetic skills. You could be able to tell. So what do we do? How do we help this child? Number one, this group of children need individualized support. They need individualized learning support. So if you're choosing a school for your child who has dyscalculia, you want to consider class sizing. Because a child who has dyscalculia will thrive when there is a close-up system of teaching as against teaching in numbers. This child will thrive when the teacher comes back to ask them. Remember that they have issues with flexible and critical thinking. So the teacher will always have to come and ask, do you understand? Do you need me to explain? Do you need me to give examples? And if your child is in a school that doesn't consider individual differences in learning, if they're not propagating individualized learning support, if they have a large class size, your child might be there and they are suffering. I have seen children learn maths better just because they're in a system of individualized learning attention. The next one, number two, is to make maths real for your child. That child that has dyscalculia, make maths come alive for them. Maths is not an abstract concept. Geography might be for a child. Maybe basic science might be abstract to an extent. Photosynthesis, what is photosynthesis? How do they touch photosynthesis? It's abstract. They would have to use a lot of imaginations and pictures, but maths is as real as life and day. So when they learn addition in school, they can come back home and begin to use addition at home without bring your pay 1 plus 2 equal nah. It could be one banana plus another banana. We put it together. How many bananas do we have? So maths is not abstract. Maths is real. For children who have dyscalculia on any spectrum, you want to make maths come alive for them. And one major way of making maths come alive for these children is through cooking. Let me give you 3 examples of how by cooking your child can learn complex maths problems. 1, fraction. An onion. They want to fry an onion. You get the onion, a whole onion, you cut it into 2. How many is this? What fraction is this? What fraction is this part of an onion to this other part of an onion? Your child, you need to add spices. Your child is able to gain spatial awareness of shapes, just by the shapes in the kitchen. So you're looking at what's the lead, they're turning the lead. Wow, this is a circular lead. Do you see? Another one is measurement. We want to cook 5 cups of rice. We measure 1 cup, 2 cup, 3 cup. They're able to measure length. They're able to weigh. If you're baking, they learn weight in school. They learn mensuration in school. Do you see? They're able to learn their metric tables, kilograms, grams, just by being inside the kitchen. The idea that maths is an abstract concept is the reason why children are struggling. If you have a child who struggles with dyscalculia, you want to make maths real. Tell them, teach them, let them know that you're not just learning division because you're going to write an exam. No, you're learning division because you're going to need it. You're not just learning money. You're learning money because we're going to go to the mall and you will need to pay, and you need to collect your balance back. One of the ways I taught my daughters her colors, because she struggled with colors a lot, I think it was a visual perception thing, but she struggled with colors a lot, was just by cars. On our way to school, we leave very early, so the road is usually clear, so she's able to see. So I'm like, show me a black car. We go, that's a black car, that's a black car, that's a black car, that's a red car, that's a yellow car. Okay, show me a red tricycle, that's a red tricycle. Just by being. She's learned counting by Uyo has a lot of trees planted everywhere. So everywhere you turn, there's a tree to count. She's learned counting because she found it difficult to quantify. So we've been able to teach her to quantify just by counting trees. That's 1 tree, that's 2 trees, those are 3 trees. Make math come alive for your child. Everywhere you are, we teach shapes just by taking a walk. The roofing of most houses, there's this triangular thing. Yeah? Not a building expert, this triangular thing. Your child can learn shapes. They can learn colors. Your child struggles with color green. Color green is everywhere. Make maths come alive. In the play area, you can make maths come alive. Your child can learn tens and units with their building blocks. Make up 10 of those building blocks. They've learned what tens are. They know what units are. They know what hundreds are. They know that 10 of those 10 building blocks put together as a unit are hundreds. Just with their building blocks. Of course, they can learn to identify colors. Make math come alive. The next one would be to fix your child's learning mindset. Remember, I mentioned that there are social and emotional concern areas for children who struggle with maths. They have inferiority, anxiety, temper tantrums, phobia, outright phobia. They think about maths and their face will just turn red just because it's maths, just because it is maths. I saw this research one time that I think 70% of Americans say that they would rather wash a bathroom than solve a maths problem. That's how scared people are of maths. I remember this course I took in school, statistics. You need to see. Like for my first year, we learned that there's one maths course you will take. Do you see? That's how phobia, learned helplessness. People feel like I can't do it. You need to instill a growth mindset. A growth mindset that focuses on the processes rather than the result. A growth mindset that teaches your child that mistakes are part of learning. And you also need to advocate in the classroom. So for a child who has dyscalculia, the teachers would have to look at how they evaluate their grades because this child is already struggling with phobia and anxiety. So you can't just give the child 0 over, even if they got 0 over 5. You would have to think of more creative ways of interpreting to this child that even if you got 0, but look at the processes, look at what you did. There are 5 steps to solve these mathematical problems. You got 1, you got 2. Okay, maybe you failed 3, 4, 5. That's not an outright failure. So they must teach these children how to deal with failure. Next one, you must use learning materials, flashcards, manipulatives, objects at home. Make maths come alive. Make maths come alive. Make maths come alive. The next one, maths is a continuum. Maths is a continuum. You want to take care of your child's maths foundation. Maths is not like other abstract subjects that once they have learned it, they might never need to revisit it till they get to their exams. Maths is not like that. If a child is going to do calculus and algebra well, they must have learned their fraction perfectly well. If a child is going to do well in maths, they must know their 4 basic math processes. We have addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. If a child has issues with addition, they will have issues with multiplication because multiplication is simply repeated additions. If a child has issues with division, with subtraction, they will have issues with division because division involves taking away how many is remaining. So you must take care of the foundation. Children who have dyscalculia will need remedial support. Because, for example, you're just in this class, you have a 9-year-old who has struggled with maths all through their life. And you're now learning that, wow, this might be dyscalculia. You can't continue from where that child stopped. For instance, they are now looking at algebra, but the child has issues with fractions. You need to go back. So you need to remedy that foundation. Any maths knowledge built on a faulty foundation will collapse. It will wait for them in grade 6. It will wait for them in secondary school. Knowledge of maths in upper basic waits for you in SS1, SS2. So we must remedy the foundation. We must remedy the foundation and address any learning gaps that these learners might have. Look for schools that support children with learning disabilities. I'm not saying special needs schools. I'm just saying that look for schools that would support a child who has learning disabilities. Quickly, let's look at the next one, dyslexia. Now, dyslexia is a common, very common, very, very, very common learning disability that is associated with associated with language processing disorder. It impacts reading, writing, and comprehension. Dyslexia might exhibit in difficulty with decoding words or with phonemic awareness, which is identifying individual sounds within words. And if a child is going to be able to read, they must have the knowledge of phonemic awareness, which involves segmenting different sounds, then blending together to form words. So children who have dyslexia are not able to do this. Now, children who have dyslexia have normal intelligence. So if you give them the right intervention, they would succeed. They will, yes, they would succeed. They would definitely succeed. Now, what are the signs and the symptoms and the concern areas for dyslexia? One, late talking. Two, they learn new words slowly. Three, they have problems forming words correctly, such as reversing the sounds in words and confusing the words that sound alike. For instance, cat and bat. They might reverse it, cat to be back, sorry, cat to be bat and bat to be cat. So they might reverse words like remembering. They might have problems remembering names, letters, numbers, and words. Next one, they might have difficulty learning rhymes, difficulty reading, slow and labored reading and writing, problems with spelling, mispronouncing names and words. They might spend an unusual time when it has to do with any tasks around reading and writing. They might have difficulty summarizing a story. They might have difficulty learning a foreign language. Remember that dyslexia has to do with language disorder. They might have difficulty memorizing. And yes, they might have difficulty doing math problems because 50% of children who have dyscalculia also have dyslexia. 50% of children who have dyslexia also have dyscalculia. Now, how do we help this child? Number one, you want to nurture thinking skills. You want to nurture your child's critical thinking by hands-on activities. You want to encourage anything that would have your child thinking, building blocks, puzzles, creative art, painting, coloring. Those things nurtures a child's thinking skills. And where best can you get amazing activities that can help your child think, if not the inner circle? Have you registered for the inner circle? There are details scrolling on your screen. Please send a chat to that number today. You don't want to be among the people that will block at the gates by the 1st of December 2023. The next would be use multisensory reading instruction. Now, these children with dyslexia would need a specialized reading instruction, which is multisensory. For reading, most times for a normal child to read, all we need to do is teach sounds, teach blending, teach segmenting, teach tricky words, do a lot of reading exercises, and that child starts reading. But for children who struggle with learning disabilities like dyslexia, you need to incorporate a multisensory approach that will involve teaching sounds through stories, storified teaching of sounds, teaching sounds through rhymes, teaching sounds through actions, tactile or kinesthetic movements, teaching sounds through rhymes. Answer my That's a way of teaching children who have dyslexia. Because remember, they have issues with memorizing. So you must teach in such a way that they become impressionable, that even if they forget the sound of heard or of heart, sorry, they will not forget the associative action. And if they forget the associative action for they will not forget the story you told. And even if they forgot the story you told, they will not forget the word examples you gave them. Apple. So when they see an apple, they are able to segment the beginning sound, which is ah. The next one would be use visual aids, stories, flashcards, objects. They are perfect for helping children through the reading program. The next one is encourage reading for pleasure. Remember that this group of children already have labored reading. Reading to them is stressful, it's work, it's a chore. So you want to make, so you can't, these are not the group of children you say, go and read your book as if reading is a punishment. It has to be pleasurable. You have to incorporate a lot of read aloud sessions. You have to dramatize it. They should find pleasure in reading. Also, teach them to teach you. This is one fantastic way of teaching children who have dyslexia. For every time they've learned a sound, ask them to come back and assume the position of the teacher to teach you. It sticks fast. Remember, they have memorization issues. So if they are taught to teach, when they've assumed the position of a teacher, that concept you're teaching will speak better. Now, you also want to build their growth mindset, because most children who struggle with learning disabilities will have emotional problems. They're going to have anxiety, they'll have inferiority complex, low self-esteem, learned helplessness, they will throw tantrums, they will have phobia. So you want to build their growth mindset. You want to look beyond the failures to turning that failures to become successes. You want to look beyond that they couldn't blend character to the fact that they could identify and if they can do they can do art. They can learn the art of blending. So you have to build their growth mindset. You have to read their growth mindset. The next one, create structures and routines at home. It is very important. If you've heard Coach Wendy speak, like Coach can't do a full session without referring to systems and structures because they are so important. The holidays are here. What are you doing? Are you just going to wake up whenever you like and the kids do everything they like? Remember that children do not thrive in unpredictability. What are they going to do by 8? What are they going to do by 9? If your child is struggling with reading, what can you do during this holiday to help them? How are you able to incorporate it into your home structure that you know how far you have gone by the end of the holiday? Lastly, create a conducive learning environment at home. Go and learn how to teach your children. You can't be going, you're yelling, and you expect a child to learn. No. The academy has a resource on how to teach children. Please get that resource and sit with it, sit with it, sit with it, sit with it. And at the end of the day, you're going to see your child do so well that it will shock you. Lastly, the last learning disability we are going to look at today is dyspraxia. Now, this learning disability is not just a learning disability, it is a neurological condition that affects learning. It is not a specific learning disability. It's a condition that affects learning. It affects skills like the gross motor skills, the large body movement, the fine motor skills. It affects a child's ability to organize, to plan. It affects their working memory. It affects their memory generally. Now, dyspraxia is a neurological disorder that impacts an individual's ability to plan and process motor tasks. Now, for these children, we always call them clumsy children. They lack balance. They lack postural control. They don't do well with physical and physical education activities. They don't do well with kinesthetic activities. They're either falling or rising. They're clumsy. A lot of teachers demonize these children. A lot of teachers. You see, this is why you need to know to advocate for your child. You need to know to advocate for your child. Let's look at the signs and concern areas. One, this group of children have problem with movement. They have problem with coordination. These children that it's as if they're always stumbling. Have you ever asked a child, didn't you see that wall? This child has issues with judgment of their movement. It's either they are here or here, they stagger, they are clumsy with their movement, they lack balance, they have very poor balance. Very poor balance. That's a sign of dyspraxia. The next will be poor posture. It's either they are always slouching, or they are bending, or they are falling, or they are stumbling, or they work noisily. They are always shoving their foot while working. It's a sign of dyspraxia. They are always easily fatigued because they lack their gross motor skills, because their gross motor skills are not fully developed, they easily fatigue, they easily get tired. That is a very huge symptom. We also talked about clumsiness. When a child is clumsy, it's a symptom. We talked about poor hand-eye coordination, visual perception. Remember, visual motor, fine motor, visual motor, gross motor. Children with dyspraxia generally have issues with this. They have issues with they are very slow at motor activities, dressing, tying their shoelace, carrying their bag. They're usually very slow people. They have barely legible writing because dyspraxia affects fine motor and visual motor. This group of children might still have, they might be on a spectrum of dysgraphia because ultimately they would struggle with legible handwriting. They have very immature drawing and copying skills because they also have issues with visual motor. It will be difficult for them to copy from the board. Yeah, this group of children also have very limited concentration because they lack executive functioning skills. They are not able to plan, organize themselves. They're not able to pay attention or focus to activities. They have very poor listening skills because they have limited concentration. They have very poor listening skills. Once you're speaking, before you know it, that child is lost. Teachers, you know those group of learners, they are lost. This child is always lost. It might be an indicator that they have dyspraxia. Next will be slow completion of classwork because they are generally clumsy. They might be slow at classwork. They are easily distressed, they easily throw tantrums. These are symptoms for children with dyspraxia. How do you help this child? One, you have to have emotions control. Because these group of children, I'm going to tell you as an educator, they are going to be those group of children that during physical and education classes, everybody's doing what they need to do. But they will be, let's assume you're working on balance and they have to work on a line, and everybody is able to work on a line. This particular child is going to be everywhere. They have issues with coordination and postural control. So you will have to be patient. If your child has dyspraxia, you will need to advocate for them. You will need to advocate for your child. Number two, they should get off the couch. Hashtag no couch potatoes. A lot of play. Whether it is structured play, unstructured play, please get your children to play. As they play, they are developing this gross motor. As they play, they are developing this gross motor. For children who have very severe oral or speech delay, you might need to see a speech and language therapist. Remember, early intervention is key. Next one, you might need to engage in activities that promote executive functioning skills, activities that promote independence. Inner Circle gives you this in such a way that it is easy for you to adapt it to your parenting system. Please join the Inner Circle with the details on your screen. The next one, you will need to reduce screen time. You need to reduce screen time. The next one, you would need to repeat a lot of instructions because these children are easily distressed, they're easily distracted, they are not able to pay ample attention. You would need to be patient and repeat your instructions over and over again. Also, because they lack executive functioning skills, you would need to break down tasks into smaller bits. For instance, you want them to do 5 things, start with 1. Even that one, break it into 2. A lot of patience. The next one is encourage physical activity, provide activities for fine motor, a lot of fine motor activities. Last but not the least, provide emotional support. In conclusion, every child who struggles with learning disabilities, if not handled with care, will deal with social and emotional distresses. You would need to provide enough emotional support from your child who has dyscalculia to your child who has dyslexia. Do you know what it means for a child to be 7 and still be the only person not reading in their class? They would need a lot of emotional support. Same with a 7 or a 9-year-old who still struggles with illegible writing. Same with a 10-year-old who is very clumsy. Now, for dyspraxia, there's no known what am I supposed to say? There's nothing you can actually do for your child who has dyspraxia that the clumsiness will stop immediately, like right now, right now, right now. But what you need to do is develop those executive functioning skills, get them to play, teach them to do their task, foster independence for them. As they grow older, you will find that they will be able to coordinate themselves better than they did. If you suspect you have dyspraxia here, you'll be able to tell that as you grow older, you are able to organize and coordinate yourself, your movements way, way, way better. So this brings me to the end of this module. Thank you so much, Coach, for this opportunity. I trust that you've gotten one thing or the other that you can begin to practice right now that would lead to the difference. I look forward to next year's learning, to use your review for next year's Learning Style course. Thank you so much, Coach, for this opportunity. I
Thank you
appreciate you,
so much,
Ma.
Precious. And who felt like dancing when Precious was talking? As in, I did. I don't know about you. And you know how you dance with that Igbo dance? You dance with your bum up.
Your
That's
waist.
why I was like, when Precious was talking about cooking, quite a lot of people were like, cooking and all of that. But I have been screaming that your child do not need a math teacher to become a math guru. All righty. Thank you so much, Precious. That was awesome. That was,
Thank you so much,
awesome.
Coach.
Thank you so much. Precious Obuna, it's the head of projects and team in the Intentional Parent Academy. And you want to reach out to Precious James Obuna, all right, she's also an educationist, runs school system, enjoys what she does. Of course, it's very obvious when you listen to her. Really, really, really obvious. Thank you so much for being here. Precious, I've been working in the academy for 3 years now. She is our oldest staff, funny enough. And yes, it's been really awesome. So you're going to be seeing Precious again tomorrow. And if you love to be here on time, all right, that's module 4, and we're going to be concluding on Saturday morning module 5. I'm going to come with the anointing for the last module. I just anoint you and then you go and do, and then
do exploits.
Thank you so much again, Precious, for your time. All right, so we have come to the end of this module. I am hoping that you can go through this again because it's a whole lot. All right, a whole lot for you to actually take in, almost a 2 hours